58.
Yep. And then we end at 1:58.
Yeah.
On the dot.
We're live on Facebook and YouTube.
I don't know. I can't tell.
Say hello to all our early.
Hello, for those of you who've tuned into Facebook. This is Andy Humm, and I'm here.
With Maren Johns. Thanks for coming when Anne's not here. I'm always worried nobody will.
Oh, are you kidding?
Yeah. I appreciate it.
We love you. And they love you.
Thanks also for tuning in on what is a beautiful day in Manhattan. It's stunning.
Right. We're finally getting some nice weather. I feel for our viewers in the Southwest and the West and all those tornadoes.
Terrible.
Things are going absolutely crazy. But we hope everybody's okay, but obviously not everybody is. Let's see here. We're 74 degrees right now here in Manhattan.
It's beautiful.
Well, we don't usually give a weather report on Gay USA. But we do have a lot of news. Okay.
Yes. We gotta fix
We
this.
have to really escalate the noise we make so that we'll be heard.
Welcome to Gay USA. I'm Andy Humm.
And I'm Maren Johns.
In for Ann Northrop, who is away this week and next week. And I just want to give them a reminder, next week we're going to be taping on a Tuesday for Facebook viewers. And Rob Shooter will be co-hosting, and then Ann will be back the following week. Okay,
It's nice to be here.
All right, so in the news, President Biden strengthened protections for LGBTQ youth in foster care and for trans workers, and on another front.
And in a first, a federal appeals court has ordered state health care plans to cover transgender surgeries.
That Pennsylvania school board has reversed its decision to cancel the talk by out actor Maulik Pancholi of 30 Rock.
And with state legislative sessions winding down, there's now actually fewer anti-LGBTQ bills than there were last year.
But there are a few that did pass, and we'll tell you about them. Democratic governors Katie Hobbs of Arizona and Laura Kelly of Kansas vetoed anti-trans legislation as Maine's Janet Mills signed a pro-trans bill.
And up in North Hampshire, we're going to hear from a student who actually testified in the hopes that one of these bills would be overturned.
Yeah. The United Methodist Church has adopted a big change to defuse debates over LGBTQ rights.
And officials in several red states are going to be pushing back against the Biden guidance for trans rights in schools.
Trouble at the 44-year-old Anti-Violence Project in New York, which deals with LGBTQ victims of violence.
And we pay tribute to trans advocate and park ranger Robbie Meekus, who died while ice climbing.
We told you that Iraq was holding off on an anti-gay bill. Well, they passed it this week. It is draconian.
And because we're both big theatre nerds, we're going to give you the LGBTQ angles on the Tony Awards. The nominations are out, as you might know.
And we have a ton of plays to review, and we'll share about that. And the Pet Shop Boys have come out with their gayest album yet.
I think it is pretty gay.
Okay. So, actually, I don't think we can start this week without talking a little bit about what's happened in the Supreme Court in the past week.
Please do.
That kangaroo court. It really is basically giving, former President Trump a free pass on his immunity thing, which is delaying any chance of a federal trial for him before the election. And, but, also they heard the case about, abortion rights in Idaho, where a woman who could risk serious illness if she doesn't have an abortion. Can she have one? And they're like, oh, well, what about the fetus? And all this kind of stuff. And it's like it's just incredibly alarming.
I don't know what the kangaroos have to do with it anyway, because I take offence. I'm Australian.
Oh, you do?
Yeah.
Do you ever use the phrase?
I know what it means.
No,
it means
but you don't use that phrase?
Funnily enough, I don't know that we use that phrase in Australia.
Okay. I wonder why we do use it.
I think I heard it up here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know why we use it. And Trump also said that he wants to surveil pregnant women in places where abortion is banned.
Yeah,
I mean, this
shocking.
is just getting absolutely out of control. And then there was the New York State Court that gave serial rapist Harvey Weinstein a get-out-of-jail-free card. He'll still die in prison due to the LA conviction, and he was hospitalized in New York, where he was returned to face a new trial.
It could have been Rikers now. Ouch.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Let's talk about what President Biden did
so
this week.
Biden's done a good thing for us. He's
Three good things.
Well, I'm going to hone in on the foster care issue. It's a new rule from the Department of Health and Human Services that requires that LGBTQI young people, teens and children, are put in supportive homes. And it's the final rule. It was proposed last September and it was finalised yesterday. It requires that all of these youth have to be protected from harassment, abuse, neglect. Regardless of the placement, they have to be able to get access to resources and services should they need them. And this is in regards of gender-affirming care.
That's great.
Yeah.
And the EEOC under Biden used Title VII to issue new guidelines to protect trans workers from discrimination and harassment. And Biden also updated the Affordable Care Act regulations, fortifying non-discrimination provisions on the basis of race and sex and sexual orientation and gender identity and reproductive care, because that's what they're in court trying to do in the Idaho case.
Yes. Do you think there's going to be some pushback against that
Thank you,
one?
President Biden.
Yes, thank you.
Not for everything, but certainly for that.
Yes.
All right. I kind of like to give them the good news about happened in that Pennsylvania case.
Yeah.
Because we've been talking about it.
Yeah.
First of all, U.S. Senator John Fetterman, a Democrat of Pennsylvania, challenged that Cumberland Valley School District for canceling an anti-bullying talk by 30 Rock star Monique Pancholi, called it a detriment to students' education on diversity and bullying, and urged the right-wing board to reverse its unanimous decision. And it was a unanimous decision.
Eight to zero.
I didn't think they would, but they did. 5-4. They reversed themselves. And there were all these kids who showed up to testify and say how important it was to be able to hear from him. And don't you like 30 Rock?
I loved it.
You know, so one of the board members is a Moms for Liberty member.
Oh, yeah.
So we're going to link to an Instagram video from Pancholi, and it was very, very encouraging.
Yeah.
And then how about that Brookdale Community College? You have that?
With our drag queen, is it a
Yes.
harmonica?
Yes.
Yes. So she's a long-time resident of Jersey City, right?
Yeah.
But this is still about New Jersey mentality.
Monmouth County.
And yes, and she'd been for months engaged to be doing a craft and storytelling afternoon for the Bring Your Kids to Work Day.
Yeah.
And there was nothing sort of unsavoury that she was programming. She literally was going to have some crafting, some singing, let people take photos if they wanted to have a photo op. And without explanation, the night before, the board contacted her and said, we won't be needing you.
Yeah, they really didn't give much of a reason other than there are differing views about this on our campus.
Right.
So we're not doing it.
Well, yeah, but I think they hopefully will change their minds. But they said they wanted to preserve the comfort level of everybody.
And I think it was being done off campus anyway, but although sponsored obviously by the school. But that's a good thing to do when you get canceled, is do it somewhere else or do it in the street. Okay. All right. How about the big decision from the Federal Appeals Court in Richmond?
Oh, yes.
Lambda legal case.
No,
Which
you go.
okay, it could end up in the Supreme Court.
Yes.
This court became the first in the nation to rule that state health care plans, Medicaid, must pay for gender-affirming surgeries,
Yep.
writing that denying them is obviously discriminatory based on both sex and gender Judge Robert Gregory, a Clinton appointee, wrote, "Gender dysphoria is so intimately related to transgender status as to be virtually indistinguishable from it." And they ruled that West Virginia's policy of denying the surgeries violated the ACA anti-discrimination provisions. West Virginia had banned transgender surgery since 2004.
Yeah.
So this took a long time.
Do you think it'll stay with us? I think they're going to appeal, especially West Virginia.
Yeah, well, they're going to try to appeal to the Supreme Court, but or to a that's the next step, but or at least maybe a panel of federal judges. But the Supreme Court hasn't taken any of these cases yet. Eventually they will, but I mean, other than the Bostock decision and the other decision which protected transgender people in the workplace.
I'm just worried that the states won't enforce this, and how will they enforce it?
Well, that's what we're going to talk about next, because politicians like Florida's DeSantis and Oklahoma's school superintendent Ryan Walters say, and this is also true in Louisiana, Idaho, Mississippi, Montana, Texas, they're not going to comply with the Biden administration's rule barring schools from using restrooms that align with their gender identities. So there's this, it's almost like standing in the schoolhouse door and saying segregation forever. That's the way we're going to keep it. But it was encouraging to see hundreds of athletes, professors, advocacy groups write to the NCAA, calling on it to support trans athletes and make it clear that they're welcome on college sport teams. Among the signatories were Megan Rapinoe and Sue Bird, more about whom later, former NFL player Chris Cluey, who was an ally, and it was organized by Athlete Ally with 55 LGBT groups and 56 PFLAG chapters on board.
Yes.
All right, some of the things in the states, huh?
What about Katie Hobbs? Is that where we're at? Wonderful news out of Arizona. Governor of Arizona vetoed a bill seeking to basically erase trans people from public life. She's actually vetoed 13 Republican bills, but this one, Senate Bill 1628, would have removed the word gender from state law, replacing it with the word sex. Now, the effects of that are pretty obvious, right? It basically says your gender expression must correlate with your birth sex.
Disastrous, and lots of states are doing it now.
Yeah. So she said, "I will not sign legislation that attacks Arizonans."
Yeah, that was great.
Yeah.
That's a great quote.
Yeah.
That's what it does. And in Kansas, the House there sustained Democratic Governor Laura Kelly's veto of a bill to ban gender-affirming care for trans youth. 200 medical and mental health professionals warned of the dire consequences of the bill if it was enacted. There were a record number of anti-LGBTQ bills in state legislatures, but just 22 passed this year, down from 75 last year. So it's either progress or they're running out of crap to do to us, I guess, huh?
Yes, and Kelly actually thanked the Kansas State House on Monday for failing to override her veto and basically applauded the support.
Right. In Michigan, finish up with the states. In Michigan, the Senate Judiciary Committee advanced a bill to ban LGBTQ panic defense. That's a positive. We have a Democratic governor and legislature there now. Oklahoma, the Senate passed an anti-LGBTQ erasure bill. Establishing what does that say? An exclusionary definition of sex, and the House passed an anti-LGBTQ religious refusal bill. I don't have to serve you if my religion says no, and they were hit with multiple tornadoes. Oh, that had nothing to do with it.
What about up in Maine with Governor...
Yes.
Not we're there yet. Janet Mills has signed a bill making the state of Maine a sanctuary for trans people and also abortion providers and people seeking abortions. That bill is called LD 227 and it establishes access to treatment and healthcare as a legal right. It also does not acknowledge other states wanting to pursue people for legal persecution for them seeking those treatments in Maine.
That's great. But Tennessee, the news continues to be terrible. Governor Lee signed a bill to terminate the State Human Rights Commission. Immediately, putting human rights in the Attorney General's office where nothing will happen. He gutted sex ed and protections for students based on family status, like if you have two moms or two dads or something like that. He advanced a bill to force school staff to out trans students to their parents. But in Kentucky, federal judge upheld the $360,000 judgment against Kim Davis, the town clerk who wouldn't do same-sex marriages But Liberty Counsel, which is handling that case, they want to appeal this all the way to the Supreme Court and use it as the vehicle to overturn same-sex marriage. That's what they envision. So scary. How about New Hampshire?
Right, yes. We're talking about Maëlle Jacques. She is a trans woman from Vermont, 16 years of age, I think, at the moment, right?
Yeah.
Who's basically using testimony, her experience as a trans girl playing on girls' soccer teams.
And wasn't this a New Hampshire hearing?
Yes, it's a New Hampshire hearing. The New Hampshire Senate voting to pass SB 375, which would effectively ban Jacques and anybody like her playing on girls' sports teams. Did we want to have a look at the video?
Let's hear from Maëlle.
Good morning, or I suppose at this point, afternoon, House Education Committee. My name is Maëlle Jacques, a 16-year-old sophomore from Newbury, and I'm here to testify in opposition of SB 375. Throughout my entire life, sports have been an integral part to my belonging, playing soccer since the age of 3. When I began my transition in the 6th grade, my school welcomed me onto the girls' team. This act of being able to be a part of the teams I belonged to allowed me to skip through the phase of social ostracization as the other girls accepted me for who I was and welcomed me, especially by their locker room rituals, like the ones where we go around and give a word of how we wanted to perform that game. Being part of the team allowed me to be seen as normal, where everywhere else I could be perceived as a pariah. I didn't join sports with the goal of dominating competition or being better than anyone else. No one would go through the bullying and self-hatred of transition purely to win a sport, especially women's sports, which are underappreciated in our nation. I joined because it's something I'm passionate about and enjoy. If banned from sports teams and locker rooms, joining the male teams wouldn't even be a choice for me with the bullying and threats I'd receive, let alone the mental anguish I'd go through being forced to be someone I'm not. Thank you for your consideration, and please vote in opposition to SB 375. Sincerely, Maëlle Jacques.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the committee? Not seeing any. Thank you. Yes, Representative Woodcock.
Thank you. Good afternoon. How you doing?
Good.
Thank you for waiting around. I know this started at 11 o'clock this morning. Just a question. In your participation in sports, have you had any other teams complain or ask you to leave or stop the game?
Never. All the other teams have been very supportive. The only problems I've received are from outside parties like media sources and whatnot. I've never received anything negative from other teams and coaches and players.
Athletes are athletes.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So the kids have no problem with it. It's these damn adults.
I do think that she brings up a point of view that we're not often presented with, which is this is not competitive for her, it's about inclusion and development. And when you look at it from that point of view, it's really not that hard to work out.
It's only a game.
It's only a game.
And of course, this was the week that in Arizona, updating people that you probably know about it, the House there, Republican-led, narrowly repealed the near-total 1864 abortion ban when a couple of Republicans joined Democrats. And I listened to the anti-abortion Republicans get up and explain their votes, and they all talked about that they are doing the bidding of their God. They may try to put now, Arizona's going to vote on abortion rights in the fall. The Republicans may try to put a countermeasure on the ballot as well. So we'll see what happens. And by the way, I just want to mention Marjorie Taylor Greene because I saw her this morning on the news and she was smirking. She's going to bring that motion to get rid of Mike Johnson as the Speaker of the House next week. And she said, and I just want to see these Democrats who are going to keep him in there go back and explain their vote for a right-wing Christian conservative. Well, they just want to keep the House running. That's all. Unlike you, and you hate the guy. So what do you care?
Oh, man. Speaking of, should we talk about the United Methodist Church?
Yes,
because
please.
we have a breaking news development there.
Go.
Yeah, so last week, of course, as you might know, that they did start, they're in at the General Conference down in Charlotte, North Carolina, right now. And in a meeting this morning, the church leaders have voted to allow LGBTQ weddings, and Methodist leaders are also able to be part of the clergy. That's a development. Happened this
Fantastic.
morning.
That's news to me. I didn't even read that this morning.
It's a 40-year ban has been overturned on self-avowed practicing homosexuals. It actually passed without debate or deliberation, overwhelmingly.
That's the thing. They weren't allowed to do this beforehand, but they've enacted a constitutional amendment in the church to diffuse these debates
Yes.
by setting up regions of the church that can make these decisions independently.
Yes.
And prior to this, the U.S. branch was not allowed to do that.
Right. Internationally, they were allowed to do that. They'd
Yeah.
already decided that the congregation could fall to their own rules
Yeah.
as their cultures saw fit. Yes.
Well, a quarter of U.S. Methodist congregations in the U.S. have left over their opposition.
They
to
knew
gay
it was
rights.
coming.
But that's a divorce is not always a bad thing, right? As many of you probably know.
They knew it was coming, I think, is what you can judge by that mass exodus. And it's great that this church has, I think, decided to keep up with the times.
Yes. Okay. Planet Fitness.
Oh boy, wow, yes, this was terrible. Basically, their tagline is judgment-free zone, so it makes sense that they're letting you use the locker room of your chosen gender identity. Well, there've been bomb threats. I think they're up to 53 states, 53
Yeah,
rather.
they're all generated by Chaya Raichik,
and TikTok,
who was that
yeah.
Libs of TikTok
Yeah.
monster who 6 people on them.
Yeah.
And they have 2,600 outlets, but
Across
they've
the
had 54
nation.
bomb threats.
Yeah,
Yes. And people are getting afraid to go.
Wouldn't you be afraid? I mean, I'm already afraid to go there with some of the people lifting weights. And I used to have a membership. I actually didn't like it anymore. Okay. My apartment building used to call it prison fitness. So, I was like, no, just kidding. I like that they have really stuck to their tagline, judgment-free zone.
Yeah.
It was one of the most inclusive. It's not an elite gym franchise.
It's their former founder actually, Michael Grandal, who was in league with Raichik to reverse this policy of inclusion.
I don't know what's going to happen. As it turns out, the woman who posted the video, she actually videoed what was purported to be a man shaving in her bathroom. Basically, she's now being kicked out of Planet Fitness because
You're
it's not supposed to take video
in restrooms.
In restrooms, yeah.
Right, that's perverted. All right, in Louisiana, here's a hell of a story. Warren Harris Jr., who picked up and stabbed to death 3 gay men in New Orleans when he was 16 in 1977, has been granted parole at 63. His victims, we should say their names, were Jack Savelle, Alden Delano, and Ernest Pommier. He robbed them for money for drugs and killed them. But he says he's found God now, and he's become a prison trustee. Now, there is a whole thing about not keeping people who committed crimes at 16 in prison for the rest of their lives.
Yeah, sure.
And we do believe in rehabilitation.
You do? I mean, he said it was just for the heroin habit.
Oh,
and
well.
he was a teenager.
Did he have to kill them?
No, listen, obviously
And
not.
he just robbed them at knife point? He was
Obviously.
crazy. But, it's many, many years later. All right, let's talk about some of the people we lost in the transgender community who were killed that we've learned about. There was a multiracial trans woman who was killed in Las Vegas in January, and we know her name to be now Sasha Williams, 36, stabbed repeatedly and died in hospital. A 20-year-old suspect was apprehended and booked for open murder with a deadly weapon. The DA will determine if he's fit to stand trial. Sasha was identified as a bi-trans woman and multiracial. She was once incarcerated herself in a men's prison, which took its toll.
No doubt.
And was involved in the Vegas ballroom scene.
Yeah, that's very sad. A Latina trans woman, are we talking about Doria Dos Passos? This one really made my blood run cold. She was murdered on a Miami sidewalk while she was sleeping outside the Miami City Ballet building on Miami Beach. This was an April 22 murder. She was only 37 years old. She was known to suffer from some mental health issues, according to her family, and she was homeless as well. Now they have arrested a suspect, Gregory Fitzgerald Gilbert, 53 years of age.
Wow, and beaten violently to death.
Yes.
There was a vigil held for her at Miami Beach's Old City Hall on April 25th, organized by Pride Lines, which is the local LGBTQ center with which Andrea was affiliated, connected. Her mom was there, grateful for all the people who loved and accepted her. The police are trying to say she wasn't targeted because of her gender identity, but the LGBTQ group there is calling on the state's attorney to add a hate crime charge. Her stepfather said the system let her down. What was she doing on the street?
I mean, I think this is a big problem. And
speaking of anti-LGBTQ violence,
yes,
the 44-year-old Anti-Violence Project in New York, which started where I live in Chelsea, Beverly Tillery, the executive director for 8.5 years. Now, she was due to step down in July, but the board just fired her. 4 board members recently resigned, including the only 2 people of color. Tillery says that the organization that aids and advocates for LGBTQ victims of violence, she's now calling for the board to step down. She's been replaced by an interim director, John Keefe, who on LinkedIn describes himself as an expert in turning around distressed businesses.
Why would they bother? I mean, there's only a few months for her to run out her...
Well, we don't know entirely. The board says they're not shutting AVP down, but they claim expenses have outstripped income and reserve funds are almost gone, and they were worried that they were headed for bankruptcy, and they're blaming the executive director.
Of course. Oh, well, there you go.
By the way, I'll look at our time. Yeah, 3 New York City Council members who are the the LGBTQIA caucus of the City Council in New York has risen up against Mayor Adams wants to impose Randy Mastro as the corporation counsel, the city's lawyer. This was Giuliani's deputy mayor, and they're citing some of his anti-gay stuff over the years. And the Black, Latino, and Asian caucus also opposes him. But the mayor is sticking to his guns, so we'll see what happens there.
Not a fan.
Right, let's talk about some of the other people we lost.
Oh, shall we talk about the trans ice climber?
Yes.
This was another story that was rather very sad to me. Robbie Meekus was a park ranger, died at 52, only having come out as trans in 2019 at the age of, 44. But she was climbing a notoriously scary peak in Denali National Park and Preserve in Alaska. It's known as the Escalator. I think it's about 8,400 feet in height there. She fell 1,000 feet to her death. She had a co-climber who was 30, I believe, who's in serious critical condition. I don't know what they were up to other than just, pushing the limits and trying to achieve something.
She was a leader in the LGBTQ community in the Adirondacks. She came out late partly because she knew no LGBTQ rangers or trans climbers. But the commissioner of the Department of Environmental Conservation, where she worked, said she exemplified the forest rangers, highest standard of excellence, working on complex searches that they had to do.
Yeah, she was part of the search and rescue missions in the heart of the wilderness. She rescued a number of people from the same kind of death that she had.
And praised her for advancing diversity, inclusion, and LGBTQ belonging throughout the agency. And we also lost, a guy I knew pretty well, Frank Stark. There's a picture of him there with, he's on the left, with Edie Windsor and Michael Adams, who's the board chair, the president of SAGE, Senior Action, I probably have the wrong acronym. It's for LGBTQ elder people like me. I'm a member. He was the president of the board. He served on the board since 2000. He previously served on the board of directors for the Fund for Human Dignity and our LGBTQ Community Center. He said, one of the tenets of my philosophy is that the value of a person's life is partly measured by how he or she affected the world around them. His contributions were substantial, mainly in raising money for all these groups, but he was very passionate about it.
Yeah, it's important. And we also lost a really great ally, Jack Wagner, the attorney that challenged the Arkansas same-sex marriage ban. He was only 62. He was a good one, I think, a perfect example of the kind of ally we need when we need them.
He did. He argued it before a federal court in 2014. 500 same-sex couples married in Arkansas before a state court ordered, before the Arkansas Supreme Court put the ruling on hold. The U.S. Supreme Court ordered same-sex marriage everywhere in 2015. His main practice was nursing home neglect and abuse. His colleagues said he always wanted to fight for the little guy, and he's survived by his wife and 2 daughters.
That's a real issue too, the nursing home
And
abuse.
I just want to, I don't have a picture here, but we mourn the loss of San Francisco minister Cecil Williams, who died at 94, a great civil rights activist and ally of the LGBTQ community. He was the pastor of Glide Memorial Church for 60 years, credited with helping build the LGBTQ movement in San Francisco, giving us a home when we were being arrested in the streets.
Absolutely.
Okay. International news?
Yes, indeed.
How about those Iraqis?
Well, I can't say it was much of a surprise to me, but Iraq has, of course, finally criminalised same-sex relationships. You can now be locked up in prison for 15 years, and also these laws apply to anybody who does not observe their birth gender. I think you can be locked up for 1 to 3 years for that. The aim is to uphold religious values. Quote, the laws aim to protect Iraqi society from the moral depravity and the calls for homosexuality that have overtaken the world.
Yes, and if you change your gender or dress in an effeminate manner,
Yes.
I don't know if this goes for both men and women,
Yeah, I think probably 1 to 3 years.
1 to 3 years. But they did, small favors, they backed off the death penalty for homosexuality.
This law, of course, is backed by the conservative Shiite Muslims, and it applies to prostitutes too.
That's just awful. The U.S. State Department said they're deeply concerned and said that the law threatens those most at risk in Iraqi society and weakens Iraq's ability to diversify its economy and attract foreign investment. But maybe they don't care because they're doing what their God wants.
Yeah.
Or, look, most of these laws, whether they're passing in the States or in these countries, it's about losing politicians who are losing their grip, wanting to play to the cheap seats.
What about the UK? The UK did something really good. They have found the money, £350,000, to build the first ever memorial to LGBTQ service people, who they're calling the Lost Legion. This is being set up by LGBT veterans charity Fighting with Pride. They're going to lead the work for the memorial at the National Arboretum in Staffordshire. Now, the part of this that I found really interesting is this was all the result of somebody called Lord Etherton, who did a review and found out that there were about 49 things he could recommend that need to be done as reparations and commemorative gestures such as this for the LGBTQ people who served in the UK military, armed forces, Navy, Air Force, all of it, especially during that period, 1967 to 2000, where the ban was on.
Well, I mean, apparently the Prime Minister did apologize for this in Parliament, which was one of the recommendations, but the Etherton recommendation was also that £50 million be allocated to vets affected by the ban. And the Prime Minister says that he promises to implement the vast majority of the recommendations. By the way, did you watch Mr. Bates and the Post Office on PBS? This is about the scandal in Britain. They were arresting postmasters for shorting the post office because of a computer glitch, and they kept denying there was a computer glitch. And thousands of postmasters' lives were ruined. Some of them were imprisoned. Wow. Some of them committed suicide. It was awful. It's a 4-part series starring Toby Jones. And this is for 15 years this has gone on. And then because of this television series in Britain, now the government's going to finally pay off these people with substantial reimbursement, like in tens of thousands of pounds.
Yeah.
Yes.
Interesting.
South Korea, the Conservative People's Party suffered big losses as the liberal opposition took a majority of the seats in the legislature, which augurs well for LGBTQ rights. Radical Christians there are all upset. They said there's going to be a homosexual dictatorship if equality legislation passes through the resurgent Democratic Party of Korea. Korea is ranked among the least gay-inclusive countries in the Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development. Anti-discrimination bills there have failed 7 times since 2007, even though 67% of Koreans, South Koreans, support it. I don't know how they feel in North Korea. But look, our gay rights bill in New York failed more than 7 times
That's right.
before we passed it.
That's correct.
All right. All right. Are we moving? Are we moving on to entertainment
We
news?
certainly are.
Hey, got to start off with our associate producer's favorite group, and maybe you'll be turned on to them now, the Pet Shop Boys. They are out with their 15th studio album, Nonetheless, it's called. Neil Tennant, 69, the vocalist who came out in 1994, called this release with keyboardist Chris Lowe, 64, their queer album. One track, Love is the Law, depicts Oscar Wilde's post-prison days in Paris, watching the clandestine cruising of gay men in the area. And another, Dancing Star, is about Rudolf Nureyev's defection from the Soviet Union to the West. And we're going to link to a story that includes these and other music videos that they've developed for this.
That's great. My favorite track was New London Boy. I thought it was really good.
What's that about?
Exactly what it sounds like it's about.
Okay.
Very gay.
All right. Well, I guess let's talk about the sports power couple, Megan Rapinoe and Sue Bird.
Yes.
They have become TV producers to develop the best-selling novel Cleat Cute. Are you familiar with this by Merrill Weisner?
No, it looks very cute. It looks like a sort of like what, not YA, but anyway, the plot goes something like this. It's about a rookie soccer player who falls for the team captain. How many episodes have we got for this? I think it's a limited series, right?
They're going to develop it into a TV show.
Yeah,
so,
it's being called a bold, sexy, fun ensemble show. I look forward to it. Bird and Rapinoe are smart ladies, and they have a message to deliver. So I'm excited.
All right. We have a lot of play. We have a lot
Let's
of play.
go.
Should we? Yeah. Let me do my play reviews, and then I'll clean it up with telling you about the Tony nominations. Okay?
And I'll chime in where I feel moved.
All right. So it was a very busy season for Broadway openings. It's insane.
It's insane.
You have to
Every
go-
night.
You have to go to the theater every night,
Yeah.
and sometimes twice a day to keep up, because they want to open all the shows in advance of the Tony nominations, which we're going to tell you about, that came out on Tuesday. So for those of you publicists who sent us to all these shows, you're going to get short reviews, because it was absolutely exhausting, and it's kind of cruel to the critics, I think, to make us do this.
It is what it is. Nobody's forcing me to do it.
Well, I
Andy.
know, but when we want to keep up on it. All right, so let's talk about Suffs.
Oh, my favourite.
On Broadway. Your favorite.
I
You start
loved it.
talking
I
about
loved
it.
it. Look, I went into this with very low expectations because I've seen so many boring and bad and so many kind of narratives around this period of history. It's never been sold to me
What's
very
it about?
well, even though I'm a feminist. It's about the suffragists who basically, suffered quite a lot actually to get the vote. To get it to happen, it took years, 7, 8 years or something.
Oh, it took forever. I mean, they
forever.
started the movement in the 19th century.
Even that, as I pitched that to you, it sounds so boring. This show, you have to see it. It is not a lecture. It is one of the better musicals this season. The songs are hummable. I really love the songs.
So it's
I really
written by
do.
Shayna
Taub.
Taub.
Yep, Taub.
She wrote the musical, and she stars as
Alice Paul.
the young suffragist, and it boasts Hillary Clinton as a producer. It's got an all-woman cast, including Grace McLean, who plays Woodrow Wilson as a ninny, basically,
Yeah.
right? I mean, this is Woodrow Wilson. I mean, it's just silly. I mean,
Yeah, I
he was
see
a
your
racist
point.
dog. I mean,
see your point.
I wasn't crazy about that presentation. But it gives Ida B. Wells, the black suffragist, her voice through Nikki James,
Yes.
full of stirring anthems and really important history.
Yes.
Now, the older establishment suffragists, Carrie Chapman Catt and Molly Hay, were played by Jenna Colella.
Jenna Colella, terrific
and-
performance.
And J.G. Maccabee.
Maccabee, yes.
Yes, as a lesbian couple,
Yes.
as they were.
Yeah. We don't know what the sexuality of Alice Paul exactly is. I feel she was probably queer or bi,
Yeah.
but Shayna definitely skirts around her identity a little bit. There's a sort of a very vague boyfriend in the background. That was my only criticism. But basically, look, a shout out to Lee Silverman's direction. It is pacey, it's imaginative, it's crisp. It gets every cast member to have their moment in the limelight. Terrific, I thought, direction.
Deals with the race issue
Yeah.
and everything else, because obviously, I mean, what these this takes place from 1913 to 1920 when it was finally
Yes.
passed. And these young activists are the ones who want to get radical, who want to who want to, protest at the White House. And I believe they say in the play, this was the first March on Washington.
It really was. And look, we all need to be a little bit schooled. One of the highlights of the play is when she gets on the horse, the white horse, and she's looking like a Valkyrie. And I said to myself, I bet that never happened. I bet that's artistic license.
Oh, it did.
What do you know? It happened.
Oh,
we do need to learn this history.
Yes, we do. And I think it's a lesson for a lot of people. I mean, I always like to point out, again, they enacted women's suffrage in the United States in 1920. By that time, my own grandmother was 40 years old. She couldn't vote until she was 40.
Yeah.
I hope she did. Anyway, then I saw Uncle Vanya at Lincoln Center's Vivian Beaumont. Now, somebody had the bright idea of taking this out of Chekhov's 1899 Russia and putting it in the recent American past. I think that was ill-conceived, despite the presence of Steve Carell, Allison Pill, Alfred Molina, Anika Noni Rose, and Spencer Donovan Jones. It kind of robbed it of its Russian soul, despite very able performances.
Yeah, well, might I say, in my opinion, that the best thing about Chekhov is 1890s Russia.
Yeah.
That's it. That's kind of the point. That's why we say Chekhovian.
Yeah.
But anyway.
So I know some people who loved it.
Yeah.
I didn't love The Wiz. I'd never seen the stage show from, decades ago. But it's sort of Soul Train meets Vegas without, but it does have out pansexual in the title. Come on. Wayne.
I didn't see it.
Yeah, all right. Oh, well, I'm going to look it up.
You can look it up.
No, I don't have it.
Too much to think about.
Wayne Brady.
Wayne Brady.
In the title role, and a supporting cast of good singers and dancers. And there were a whole bunch of understudies in it the night I saw, and they said, "Oh, do you want to come back another night?" I said, "No, it's fine."
Yeah,
and they were terrific.
Wow.
Terrific
Great.
voices, but the show. And then we're going to think of something we're going to disagree on. Patriots by Peter Morgan, who did The Crown and everything like that. It's a show that I think did capture the Russian soul. I liked it very much in London. It's about an oligarch, Boris Berezovsky, who made Putin. And Putin is played by Will Keane, who is also, I think, terrific. The oligarch is a colorful rogue who thinks he can save Russia, but Putin is very chillingly played. And of course, knowing what we know about him now, I think that makes it more effective. But let's hear what you have to say.
Oh, look, I found it. I was bored. It might have just been the night, but I felt like the basic Britishness of it. And, I have British roots, but I feel like it didn't put me in Russia. And maybe it's just I spent, the last 2 years covering the Ukraine war for my other job in breaking news. But it felt to me, it didn't tell me anything I didn't know. So I might not be the right
I'm just going to say,
person
I had
for
two
this
people
play.
sitting next to me who I struck up a
They were like, didn't know?
Huh?
They were shocked?
No. No. Older people from Russia. They left in 1979.
Wow.
And the woman was in tears over this thing, over the Russia that she feels was, could have been, but it didn't become.
At what point, though, in the play is it really? Do they put a flag in the sand and say this is the moment Russia's fate turned and it?
Well,
never
you see, in the beginning,
back?
and it shows the play. I mean, again, you say you didn't learn anything, and we do know this. Putin comes in. He's trying to appeal to the West. He goes on Barbara Walters. He's like, he's going to be Western. And then he really just gives up on that and becomes this totalitarian maniac and starts killing people who are his enemies, including one of the oligarchs and the bodyguard for the oligarch, all that guy who was in this. So that's the way it went there. And then he just, because the oligarch says, "Hey, I made you. You got to do what we say." And Putin says, "I'm the president. You're leaving." And that's what happened.
It's every taste is very, very subjective, but I felt also there was no poetry for me. And when I think about Russia and depictions of Russia, to me it is one of the greatest cultural tragedies, this failed revolution. To me, the turning point was when they shot the Romanovs, for me, in Russia, because it's kind of like the blood on their hands, it was never going to work. It doesn't matter which figurehead you
Well-
put in, whether it's Yeltsin, Gorbachev, Putin, doesn't matter.
You could probably go way before that in terms of the way they treated the serfs and the peasants.
Absolutely.
you know.
Where does it go? It doesn't go far enough back
And it's
for
the
me.
same thing here.
Yeah.
You know, our current strife goes back to slavery, which is
doesn't
our
it?
original sin.
Or are all revolutions cursed? That would be my question. I wonder.
And it only took how many hundred, years for women to get the vote.
I know. Moving on. What do you got else for us?
Well, very briefly, I saw The Great Gatsby. This is a musical of it because the novel is now in the public domain, so they made a musical out of it. And it's a spare no expense production at the Broadway Theater, but with a very generic Broadway score with lots of belting that's very unmemorable, starring Jeremy Jordan, who I loved in Newsies, and Eva Noblezada playing Daisy Buchanan, his love interest. I loved her in Hadestown. Noah Ricketts, who starred in Fellow Travelers, one of the gay guys, black gay guy, is Nick Carraway, who the narrator. But all the talent is pretty much wasted. It shows what can happen when something goes in to the public domain. And, nobody controls it anymore. And then finally, the gayest play of the week, was Mother Play by Paula Vogel, out lesbian,
Yes.
right? Who did How I Learned to Drive, won the
Yes.
Pulitzer Prize, right? So this is a memory play about growing up from the 60s on to the present day with a gay older brother, played by Jim Parsons, who's out gay, and a cool but poor and very difficult mother, Jessica Lange. Now, and Vogel's stand-in, who's called Ruth, is played by Celia Keenan Bolger. All of these players were nominated for Tonys, which we're going to talk about. And as I said, it's the gayest play. It deals with issues about coming out in families in that era that have not changed much in many parts of the country. And for such serious issues, also including alcoholism and poverty, it's a very light play that elicited a lot of laughter. I was kind of a little uncomfortable with some of the laughter because it played on all the jokes about having gay children and all that kind of stuff. So anyway, the Mother Play, it's one of the big hits of the season.
I haven't seen it, but I was expecting something, I suppose, a bit more Tennessee Williams. I mean, Jessica Lange has such stature as a performer that.
She's a huge hit in this, and she is nominated for Best Actress in a Play. And this is, one of the most nominated plays that they have. So let's talk a little bit about the Tony nominations.
Well, anything surprising? What jumps out at you when you first saw the list? What did you think?
Well, we want to talk about the LGBTQ angles, as we just did with Paula Vogel's Mother Play. And again, out Jim Parsons also got a nod for Best Featured Actor in a Play. Joshua Harmon, who's out gay. Now, it was not a gay play, but this is called Prayer for the French Republic, about a very timely thing about anti-Semitism in France in 2016, and it's not running anymore.
I enjoyed it.
You did?
I did enjoy it,
No,
yeah.
it's a good play,
Yeah.
And then for Best Play Revival, Appropriate by the out gay playwright, black playwright, Brandon Jacob Jenkins, starring out Sarah Paulson, who was nominated for Best Actress in a Play. You saw it?
I think it's it's her first nomination, isn't
Really?
it? I think it might be, but that would surprise me
Yeah.
because she's terrific on stage.
Well, I mean, Daniel Radcliffe, who's not gay, got his first nomination for supporting player in a musical for
Merrily
Merrily We Roll Along. And of course, Merrily We Roll Along by the late gay composer Stephen Sondheim was nominated for Best Musical Revival. And it also got nominations for Jonathan Groff, who's out gay, for Best Lead, and for Ms. Lindsay Mendez, who was also in the cast. And then the very small thing, Water for Elephants. Did you see it?
I didn't see it.
Okay, it got a nomination for Book of a Musical, which was by Rick Elise, who was an out gay man. Right. Yeah, who did well. Anyway, so. Okay, so you know what? We've got some time to fill here. So
Well, what else? Who else are we happy about getting noms? I'm really happy for Eden Espinosa for Lempicka, because she plays this sort of forgotten. I had never forgotten about her because when I was coming out, I had to find every woman in history that was even remotely queer and read every book.
We never reviewed Lempicka here because we didn't see it. So
I can give it a little
you
bit
go
of a
ahead.
review
It's a big
now.
lesbian thing.
It is. It's based on. It's about the life of Tamara de Lempicka, who is a kind of Gatsby era jazz age painter who was very influenced by the Cubists, and she painted these fabulous sort of monolithic images of women. I think Madonna's a big collector, one of the biggest collectors of her work. But the musical basically argues that these images help create the modern woman. And I think that's a little bit of a long bow to draw, but nevertheless, I did enjoy this musical. Lots of Russians and Poles in the audience because she was, of course, Polish. But she had, jewels squirreled away all over the world, and she was able to sustain herself. She had a sort of a Garbo-esque quality, woman of intrigue, but she had lovers of both sexes, and she painted all these women that kind of became iconic.
So the moral is store jewels all over the world.
Well, the moral is one of the things I think that is confusing about the book to this play is I'm not sure it knows what it wants to say. It wants to say that Lempicka was a great feminist, but I'm not sure she was. I think she was a great survivor, and those two things are not necessarily the same.
Well, if you want to see great feminists, go back to Suffs on Broadway, that musical. And again, it shows the strain between the young guard and the old guard. There's an old guard that wants to just have tea with President Wilson and politely ask for these things.
Yeah.
But at one point, I don't want to give too much away, but I mean, at one point, as in England, these women got arrested for protesting outside the White House and force-fed in prison.
Locked up. They threatened them with a mental institution. I mean, and honestly, at that point in history, they would have just thrown away the key. Those women would never have been able to get out. But look, it was moving. I found that production to be very fun, and the songs. I can remember at least 3 or 4 of the songs. A lot of musicals, I don't remember one song.
Well, that's true. It's certainly true of The Great Gatsby, and you will come out of The Wiz humming "Ease on Down the Road."
Oh yeah, that's true, of course. But that's
That's a
shout out to there's a performer called Amber Iman, who is a woman of colour who plays the composite character in Lempicka of all Lempicka's female lovers. Now, I'm not sure it works as a device, but nevertheless, I was incredibly grateful to this performer. She blows the roof off the theatre. She's the best, so maybe she'll win in her category.
And we promise you, there will not be much theater to talk about next week. I'm sorry if again, these are things playing in New York. Now, some of these shows, we talk about theater on Broadway because many of you come to Broadway. Some of you even write me, say, what do you recommend these days? But these shows also hit the road, and they're touring productions of them. So you may see them here, there, and everywhere around the country.
Yeah, and I like to think sometimes theatre is a little bit of a litmus text for how the zeitgeist is dealing with certain issues at certain times, and I think it's often quite useful to see what are the themes hitting Broadway and off-Broadway, what's happening, what do people think is worth, millions of dollars in production values.
They do spend incredible amounts of money on things.
Yeah.
Yes. Oh, by the way, the United Kingdom is bringing us a new documentary series about Kevin Spacey.
Yeah.
It's due this week there, and it's coming to the United States on something called ID and Max. Well, of course, I know about Max. Kevin Spacey has beaten 4 raps alleging sexual assault on men, including rape. This series interviews multiple men on their experiences being sexually harassed by Kevin Spacey, unrelated to the trials that he went through. It will examine his life from childhood to stardom to his fall. And this guy, he's very dark. He issued a statement saying, "I'm honored to be in my first film with Warner Brothers in many years. I hope the Academy takes note of some of the great acting by the lesser-known cast.
Oh, man.
Whoa, he's a nasty piece of work.
He's just. This is coming to us courtesy of Channel 4, which I always think do a good job. But this doc is being described as forensic, quote unquote. So they're going to go through everything. The guys involved are just British, I believe. They're just the ones from.
I see.
From England.
But you know the thing about Spacey. Look, I mean, I heard about his importuning men on sets and all that kind of stuff for years. I have an ex-boyfriend who slept with him voluntarily when he was a kid. You know, I'm just saying, you know, he never came out until he got in trouble. And then he said, oh, I'm a gay man. I mean, we always knew he was, and he would never acknowledge it. And that's, you know, that was, but, you know, the Kevin Spacey psychosis, if you want to put it that way, was he grew up in a very crazy household. His father was a collector of Nazi memorabilia, and you can take it from there. And they can write a play about this. And so he was, because of that, he always felt very guarded about his personal life. I wouldn't call it his private life, but his personal life. And he would say in interviews, I don't talk about that. It's none of your business. I'm not talking about that. No, I'm not answering. You just say, I'm not talking. And you know, you're entitled to do that. But that's the way he was, and that he had all this secrecy in his life that stemmed from childhood. Yeah.
Well, it's going to be very interesting, the issues they find around consent, because I think that is even a grayer area for gay men than it is for.
Yeah.
I do. I think it's more difficult to define what it is, perhaps. There's so many different signals and rituals in hookup culture for men. But I don't know.
There are lines about this in the Mother play.
Oh, really? Haven't seen it yet. I got to see that play. I think so. I don't think we've discussed male sexual abuse in the culture very much at all.
Well,
So,
I mean, male on male
Yes,
sexual abuse.
yes, and I think maybe-
domestic violence.
Yeah.
But it occurs everywhere, and it occurs in lesbian relationships as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember, it's interesting how the media often hears rumours about people before other people do, but I heard rumours about Harvey Weinstein in the 90s.
Oh, please.
I mean,
Everybody
most
did. They made
people
jokes
did.
about it at the Oscars, and at these, you know, they made jokes about it.
But as a woman, what women would just say is, it's like you just stay away from that man, you know. It's like we're raised to sort of read those signals and then judge other women who are foolish enough to fall into the trap. And
He
it's-
was king of the casting couch, which is
Exactly.
something that's been going on for, you know, forever, basically. People in power using their power to demand sexual favors.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is all the tropes around this stuff is different for heterosexual paradigms than it is for, you know, gay men. Come up to my apartment might be different for gay men.
Well,
I don't know.
Obviously, a lot of the people who were importuned by or harassed or raped by Kevin Spacey did not like it.
No.
And they brought
Well,
cases and they lost.
I've read some
He
shocking.
had some great lawyers, obviously, and part of it was the age of the cases. They were the older cases, which become harder to prove and those kinds of things. But I remember when he was arrested cruising in a park late at night in London, right? Yeah. And then he had to do a press conference the next day because he was head of the Young Vic Theatre and it had already been scheduled. And what he said was, I want to thank David Beckham, who was involved in some big news scandal or something like that, for taking me off the front page.
Yeah.
I mean, but he joked about it, but that,
He feels he's immune, doesn't he? So we'll see what happens. But yeah, sometimes these documentaries do shift.
So this is a hard week. I mean, everywhere, whether it's the strife on campus, the strife in the Middle East,
that's terrible.
The strife in Darfur and in Myanmar and in the stepped-up war in Ukraine versus Russia, and the threat of losing our own country here.
Yeah. I'm very sad about the turmoil on campus because this is affecting young people's academic records, and I'm sure it's actually affecting friendships and allegiances on campus and making the campus a much more divided place.
People are standing up for things they believe in,
I
and
don't blame them.
And they are willing to pay a price. They know what they're doing. It was pointed out that in 68, when they arrested a lot of people on campus for protesting racism and the Vietnam War, they went back and restored everybody's degrees and everything. But a lot of these people who are protesting now are people of color, and are they going to do the same thing for them?
I don't know.
That's the thing.
Yeah.
So it's yes, it is a fractious, upside down world, but you know these young people, and in the tradition of young people, especially, and that's mostly who are at these demonstrations, are standing up for for justice.
Sure.
On many sides in many respects.
Yeah, they have the time and the energy to do so. I think we need to listen to them because they're kind of like the canary in the coal mine.
Right. Well, we're almost out of time. It's been great being with you. I'll be here with Rob Shooter next week. We're taping on a Tuesday for those of you who watch on Facebook. And thank you, Maren Johns.
You're welcome. It's always a pleasure to come back and see everybody. I hope you enjoyed the show.
And we'll see you next week.